field. So congratulations to Marquise Frazier. So earlier today, and you've got Fox Sports, you have ESPN, you've got the Big 12 Network, you've got others that are here, obviously a lot of local radio stations, or in our case, SicEm365 Radio. And Robert Smith, former Ohio State running back and Vikings running back, really good dude, and also pretty darn good at analyzing football, joined us, and he's a guy that probably could have taken advantage of name, image, and likeness, and his thoughts about that.
To do something like this, say, hey, you get 50% of it now, you get 50% when you graduate, so that you have something to incentivize the players to do what they went to school to do in the first place, which is to get that degree. But I also think that you don't want your players too focused on it. And you heard Coach Patterson earlier talking about this. I know you guys may have been busy doing some other things. He said, if they're guys that are that focused on name, image, and likeness, they may not be even the kind of guys that they want. I absolutely think that players should be able to earn money off of it. I'm just concerned, especially in conjunction with what we have with the transfer rules now, because the players can transfer automatically. Who's to say that some big donor doesn't say, hey, I really like the kid on that team, let's offer him a big name, image, and likeness deal, and now he can transfer without even having to sit out. So those are the only kind of things that concern me.
As you look at the landscape of the Big 12 this year, Iowa State, they're knocking on the door, and they should be. Is it fair to say, if not now, when for Iowa State? Yeah,
I really think so. When you look at Brock Purdy being there, and then you got the three great tight ends, and I tell you, Breece Hall. I was watching some of the games last week. I watched both of the Oklahoma games, the regular season, and the Big 12 championship game again. I love this kid. He reminds me of peak Le'Veon Bell. He's just so patient. He sees things extremely well, a very natural and quick spin, and good explosiveness and power as well. So you look at that combination, and then you got a decent number of those guys back on the defensive side of the ball. We all know what defensive coordinator John Haycock has done, something that a lot of defenses, even in the NFL, are kind of looking at that three safety system and saying we need to do this. And you look at last year, obviously winning in the regular season and then losing in that championship game, -3 in the turnover ratio in that game. But I think looking around the Big 12, even looking at Texas, one thing that Tom Herman obviously did well was recruit. The cupboard is kind of full. I know people looking, you lose a guy like Sam Ehlinger, but Thompson and Carr, these guys are dangerous too. Obviously Thompson finished the bowl game a year ago, and then here at TCU, with Max Duggan, last year not having the offseason because of COVID, not having the time to work with the young receiving core that they had, and then having the heart surgery. I think they've got a legitimate shot. So you look at the top four teams in the conference. Everybody's talking about Oklahoma, but Iowa State, Texas, and TCU, I think they all are kind of 1A, B, C, and D in my mind.
Since you brought up Oklahoma, I'll go ahead and get them out of the way here. Spencer Rattler, obviously, at the end of last year, really was playing at a high level, Heisman favorite, front runner, what have you. Where can he get better, and where do you see the holes in this team since that defense stepped up in a big way last year?
Yeah, and I think for any young quarterback, it's really just seeing more scenarios. Like you only have so much time, and I think that particularly with young quarterbacks, when you don't have that opportunity to get those reps in the offseason, you haven't only so much ability to give them so many looks in a preseason. How many different ways can a defense attack me? When do I have to be aware that we've got a bunch formation, this is likely where the pressure is going to come. If the pressure is going to come from there, how do I escape? So just movement in the pocket, and then decision making. Are you going to insert certain situations realize, hey, it's better to live to fight another day than it is to try and force something and throw an interception. Those are just things that really come with reps for quarterbacks, and we see it, not just from the jump from high school to college, but obviously even college to the pros. It's important to not only know the capabilities of your receivers, but to also know the capabilities and limitations of defenders. And when defenders they get so much better and their breaks are so much better, you have to understand how much space you actually have, and you want to trust your arm, but you don't want to be cocky in certain situations.
Dave Aranda faced every possible hurdle his first year. No spring drills, obviously COVID.
Lost a couple games early.
Yeah, and then on top of that, there was a huge delay in the middle of the year. They went almost a month. They showed signs defensively, which is what his strength is. Offensively, they were a wreck. They couldn't do anything. And now you bring in Jeff Grimes, Eric Mateos, and your thoughts about what he faced and his, what you expect in year two.
It's interesting. When I was with Minnesota, Tony Dungy was our defensive coordinator, and I had never met Coach Aranda until last year, and we called one of their games a year ago, and that was my first thought was, wow, this is Tony Dungy I'm talking to right now. So he has the temperament, and I think that he understands what you really. It's not just one message. It's not just one way to get through to players. It's really understanding who it is that you're dealing with. You're all fighting for the same thing, but I think that he really understands how to get through the players and how to best craft his message to players to get the most out of him. And obviously, the defensive side, they were the best defense anybody that had faced Oklahoma a year ago. And those timing issues and players not just understanding what it is that they need from their staff, but also coaches understanding what players are truly capable of. And that's something that takes a little bit of time. And again, I don't want to make excuses for anybody because everybody had to deal with the same situation with COVID a year ago. But having another year under his belt and seeing who's on that staff or who's on that roster and what you can get out of them and what situations they thrive under is going to help him this year.
He has, in ways, leaned on Tony Dungy. He's brought that up. Dungy's given him some advice. Don't be someone you're not, in a way, because of that personality being so similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And, nothing will lose a locker room faster than insincerity. And players see that right away. They know that if the message is genuine or not. That's something that doesn't take any time.
With a guy like Dave Aranda, too, he's only been a head coach for a year. This is his second year of doing it. You've been around the game a long time. Is it true that the biggest jump you'll make in your coaching career is at year two, where you realize, here's all the things I'm never going to do again, and then move on?
Yeah, and, I can understand it from the player perspective. I honestly can't even imagine how difficult it must be for coaches, especially for college coaches. I mean, this is high school. Obviously, it's a different animal. Even at the pro level, I think it's completely different because it's their job. Like, it's a player's job to play football. College coaches really have to deal with all these other aspects, like, did this kid show up to class? Did this kid, was he out on campus last night? Is he having girlfriend issues? And then have to deal with the alumni and all the other media responsibilities that they have. And then, to make sure that they actually understand philosophically what we're trying to do, but actually tactically what we're trying to do. Are they getting these steps right? Is my staff, the staff that I just assembled, where is the breakdown? If something didn't go right on the field, was it a coaching method that one of the assistants had? How did they actually do it that week? How did install work? All of that. I mean, so I don't see how the jump couldn't be big, at least in understanding, how all those pieces fit together. And he's one of those kind of guys, I think, He doesn't have an ego that says it's got to be my way or I have all the answers right now. He truly understands that, we're kind of all students for life, right? No matter what it is that we're doing, no matter what our job is, we always try and get better, right?
You mentioned Steve Sarkisian a little bit ago. Why do you think he could be the guy that they've been searching for since Mac Brown?
Jeez. Well, it's such an interesting job to me. Obviously Charlie only got 3, and Coach Herman got 4, and Coach Herman, look at 7-3 a year ago, and I know that some people will say, well, yeah, there were some close wins too, but having the close losses and how close they were to having all of that come together, it wasn't as far off, I think, as a lot of people think. And the bottom line is, the powers that be at the University of Texas, they don't care. They have something in mind of what they want that program to be. And I think probably what happens in a situation like this, we look at what Coach Sarkisian has done, what he's been through. I think on a personal level, probably has a great deal to do with kind of what people see in him, that he's a guy that's overcome some things. And then we have to acknowledge the Saban tree. Now, the Saban tree hasn't done well against Saban, right? Just like
no one else has either.
Like we see, nobody. It's like Belichick in the NFL. The tree. They get clipped from that tree, and things just don't quite work out the same way. But I think what probably happened is they looked at Sark. They heard kind of how he developed under Saban, and you look at him and the way that he not just. I think his base philosophies from an offensive standpoint, to hear, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to actually watch like some of his presentations and to hear him explain why he does what he does and how that fits into their overall scheme. He's a brilliant offensive mind, but I think more importantly what they realize is he's going to be able to also do what Coach Herman seemed to be doing, which is bring in the talent, but more importantly develop the talent. And I think that's probably what was missing more than anything else.
And he
developing it.
To one more thing about Texas, one of the things that always frustrated me when I watched Texas, they didn't give them the bell cow the ball enough.
Yeah.
Like Herman just doesn't feed the running back a lot of carries. And Sarkisian at Alabama, of course, they have 5 of them.
All 5 stars.
All of them are like Bijan Robinson. So that's something that'll be interesting to see what he does. Your thoughts about the college football playoff and what appears to be the fast road very quickly here to what might be expansion soon.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. The devil's always in the details, right? I think 12 is an interesting number. Thinking about, how many times do we really say that there are 12 teams that have a legitimate chance to win a national championship? I don't know. And when we went from the BCS to the college football playoff, you went from 2 to 4, and back when it was 2, 3, 4, and 5 were unhappy. When it's 4, 5, 6, and 7 are unhappy. When it's 12, 13, 14, 15 are going to be unhappy. So we're going to see some of that. But I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in regards to the schedule, especially of championship games. And the fact that you're going to have these conference championship participants and trying to fit that into a much longer schedule. Do some of those get buys? Yes. And again, it's just interesting to me kind of how all these things are going to come out. But I'd like the opportunity for more teams to be involved. I just don't know if 12 is the answer. 8 seemed to make more sense to me, especially to make that kind of leap. We saw 2 to 4. 4 to 8 seemed to make more sense to me, but they feel that I think they're going to give an opportunity to some of those group of 5 schools that have kind of been left out of the equation.
Yeah, if you're going to do it, might as well go big, right, Robert?
But then you have why not 16?
Yeah,
then?
it's like the NCAA men's tournament used to be 16,
right?
Then 32, and then 4. It's just like never the numbers. No one's ever happy. But on the group of 5s have no chance. So basically, we've seen some that have made a run, and some of them could have done things to get there. But isn't that what makes the NCAA men's tournament so great? Is it a group of 5, or in this case, a team like a Valpo or a whoever XYZ can make a run? George Mason, and then can college football ever get to that point, even if it's a first-round upset?
I would hesitate to say never, just because I've been around football long enough to know that things can happen. But I think it's going to be much more rare in college football, just because in basketball you got 5 players, 5 starters, and I mean you have 8 or 9 guys that are playing consistently. In the NFL or in football, you've got 11 starters on both sides of the ball, right?
Yeah.
You've got not just the frontline talent, but the depth of talent that you get at the blue blood schools is so much greater.
And to do it once, much less have to do it maybe 2 or 3 times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the fact that they're going to be lower, the lower seeds, like I think that there's more of a drop when you talk about college football and just the way that football is in general. That's why they have series in basketball. In the pros, you've got 7 games. Like it's one and done in football, right? That's why we love it so much, because you got one opportunity to go out there and do it. But you have these teams at the top in college. I think there's so much more of a difference between number 1 and number 12 in college football. Not just from frontline talent, but from a depth standpoint and just the way that the game is played. You're not just going to have 1 or 2 guys that can take over a game in football the way that you do in basketball. So I think it's going to be more rare.
Glad to have you back, man. Glad to be back in this environment,
This is incredible.
Yeah.
Thinking back to a year ago when, there was a good chance that we might not even have football, right? And to come driving up today, to see all those cars out there, to see everybody here today, and to be at it again, and having these kind of conversations, man, it's just the best.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it. Robert Smith, Fox Sports Television on SicEm365 Radio.